In the course of this video series, we have seen that languages contain words that are labels for categories of things, ideas, actions, and qualities, and that people use these category labels to formulate messages with the purpose of communicating with other people. Other people infer what those messages mean by relying on their understanding of what the category labels can refer to and their beliefs about the contexts they share with the sender of the message. They are aided in this process by word order, prosodies, a relatively small set of grammatical words, affixes, and other tweaks that guide them in inferring how the things, ideas, qualities, and actions that are referred to in the message relate to each other in space and time. While all spoken languages make use of the same kinds of strategies and tools and seek to accomplish the same kinds of goals, each language maps words to reality in somewhat different ways than the language next door, and may use a different tool to indicate a given relationship between the things being talked about. And this video will consider examples of some of those differences. The most obvious difference between one language and another is the way they sound. While the different sound systems of different languages have little impact on their usefulness for conveying information, they do influence how that information is structured. This is most apparent in the use of language for oral performance, where meter, rhyme, alliteration, and other devices affect word choice, magnify emotional impact, and serve as an aid to memory. Music, poetry, speeches, and sermons all make use of these features. Ambiguity in language also arises from the sounds of words, so what is ambiguous in one language may not be in another. A less obvious difference is that languages categorize things differently. The vast majority of words in one language will not have exactly the same range of possible meanings as any word in another language. This means that we cannot translate a word in one language with the same word in another language everywhere that it occurs. For example, whereas in English all of these things are called rice, Bahasa Indonesia has a different word for each. In Indonesian, rice is called padi when it's still growing on the stalk, geba after it is picked but before it is hulled, beras after it is hulled but before it is cooked, and nasi once it is cooked. In this case, 4 categories in Indonesian correspond to 1 in English. Of course, in reality, most cross-linguistic categories do not overlap so neatly. In English, for example, most of these things are called balls, and 2 of them are called balloons. What's the difference between a ball and a balloon? In French, these are categorized somewhat differently. While these things fit into the balle category, these are called ballons. The main thing to notice is that some of the things that were in a different category from the balloon in English are in the same category with it in French. Can you figure out what makes a ballon a ballon? These things, though, are neither in the ballon category nor in the ball category, but in the boule category. And this thing is a pelote. Balls of dough or cheese and round loaves of bread are also boule, and pincushions are also pelote. And bullets are also balles. Can you guess which features distinguish a pelote from a boule, from a balle, from a ballon? Language and culture are intimately linked, each shaping the other. This close relationship is sometimes subtle and easy to miss, but in other instances is more obvious. The link can be clearly seen, though, in the terms that different cultures use for relatives. For example, in America, we have terms for the other children of our parents, also known as our siblings. If they are boys, they are our brothers, and if they are girls, they are our sisters. What could be more logical? For people in many cultures, however, the terms brother and sister lack a crucial bit of information: the relative age of the person one is referring to. In Mandarin, for example, if your brother is older than you, he is your gaga. If he is younger, he is your didi. An older sister is your jeje, and a younger sister is your meme. In Yarafolo, a language of West Africa, an older sister is your jua, and an older brother is your lua. But if they are younger than you, both sisters and brothers are called chani. It may seem strange to have a term for your kinfolk that does not distinguish between the sexes, but this is true of the English term we use for the offspring of our aunts and uncles, whom we call cousins, be they boys or girls, younger or older. In Yarafolo, the children of your uncles and aunts, whom we would call cousins, are also called Loa, Jo, and Choni, depending on their sex and age, the same terms one would use for one's own brothers and sisters. And on your dad's side of the family, Yarafolo uses the same word for uncle as dad, and the same word for aunt as mom. What this means is that if you are translating from English to Yarafolo, you can fairly confidently translate every instance of the words mom and aunt with the Yarafolo word ya, without giving the matter too much thought. However, if you are translating from Yarafolo to English, and you run across the word ya, you may not know if you should translate it as mom or aunt, without doing a bit of research into the context. The problem is even more difficult if you need to translate the English word uncle. While the Yarafolo word for uncle on your dad's side is tu, the same as the word for dad, the word for your mom's older brother is na. To make things more complicated, not only does a boy call his mom's older brother his na, his mom's older brother also calls the boy his na. And not only is the terminology different, the people who call each other na have financial and social obligations toward each other, unlike any typical uncle-nephew relationship in American culture. It's a relationship that no single term in English can fully capture. The group of qualities, ideas, or actions referred to with a common category label also differs from language to language. It is often easiest to understand how these categories differ by considering other words that these words occur with. For example, in English we say, we eat bread and drink water. In Mandarin, the verb used for consuming bread is chi, and the verb used for consuming water is he. So in these examples, chi corresponds to eat and he to drink. Can we say then that chi means eat and he means drink? A problem with doing so is that in English we say we eat soup. But in Mandarin, the verb that indicates consuming soup is he, the same one used with consuming water. Should we say then that he means both eat and drink? It gets more complicated still. In English we say we take medicine and smoke cigarettes. But in Mandarin, the verb for both of these is chi, the same one used for eating bread. Do these words then mean the same thing? Other languages divide these things up in other ways. Yarafolo, for example, uses the verb boire for drinking water, and uses the same word for both eating soup and taking medicine. However, whereas English uses the word eat for consuming both bread and rice, and Mandarin uses chi for both of these activities, Yarafolo has a different word for each. In Yarafolo, ka is used for consuming bread, but another word, li, for consuming rice. A comparison of the verbs used in these three languages with 5 objects hints at the challenges that arise when translating between them. In addition to differences in the things and ideas that words in different languages denote, there are also differences in what they connote. Connotation derives as much from culture as from language, and differences in connotative meaning vary from place to place. Terms that denote chickens may connote cowardice, but in various places imply inexperience, weakness, or foppishness instead. Calling someone the equivalent of a dog may label them as ugly, but in various cultures may indicate that they are lucky, shrewd, or morally corrupt. Calling someone a snake may impute treachery, but in other places imputes cruelty, cunning, or wisdom. If you call someone a pig in English, you may mean he is gluttonous or dirty. By calling him a cochon in French, you might mean he's a pervert. Calling someone your little cabbage in French is a term of affection, as is calling someone your bunny, or even your mouse in German. To have a cow in English is to overreact. To have a pig in German is to have a stroke of luck. To make a cow in Colombia can mean to chip in for a purchase. Just as the category labels used by different languages group things, actions, qualities, and ideas in different ways, their grammars make different kinds of distinctions and require speakers to make different kinds of information explicit. As an example of this, let's consider pronouns used to indicate me and somebody else in English and Indonesian. In these sentences are the two instances of the word we referring to the same people. In both sentences, the pronoun we is referring to the speaker and at least one other person. In the first instance, the person being addressed is not included in that group. In the second sentence, however, the person being addressed probably is included in the group of people that we is referring to. While the English word we can be used in either instance, many languages require that different words be used for the two different meanings. For example, in Indonesian, the word that includes the person being addressed is kita, and the one that excludes the person being addressed is kami. Whether the addressee is included in the group of people being referred to or not is an extra bit of information that Indonesian requires speakers to make explicit, but which in English is usually inferred from context. On the other hand, a bit of information that English requires speakers to make explicit through their choice of first-person plural pronoun that Indonesian does not is whether or not the speaker is the subject of the sentence. So, for example, in this sentence, we is used at the beginning because it is the subject, and us is used at the end because it is not. The grammars of these two languages require speakers to make different kinds of information explicit through their choice of pronoun. Indonesian speakers can use either kita or kami for either subject or object, but must indicate if the addressee is being included or excluded. In English, neither we nor us indicates inclusion or exclusion, but each always indicates grammatical role. What this means is that the choice of pronoun we use will not always be obvious. For example, which Indonesian word would you use to translate us in this sentence, kami or kita? How about to translate we in this one? How would you know which one to pick? While some choices are obvious, many require an understanding of the wider context to be sure. In our next video, number 21, we'll consider some more ways that languages differ, including other kinds of information that some languages require to make explicit, but other languages don't.